Hi everyone, my name is Connie Collins Morgan. I am an author. So far I have 3 children's books that have been published: The Runaway Beignet, Hercules on the Bayou, and The Cajun Fisherman and His Wife. Currently I am seeking representation for my 4th children's book, which is entitled It's Time for Bed, Granny.
Please share a little bit about your background.
I grew up in a French-speaking culture in Lafayette, Louisiana. I lived minutes away from the Vermilion Bayou. For me, as a child, the bayou was a magical place that fueled my imagination with enchanting adventures. On the bayou, I battled fire-breathing gators lurking in the deep and climbed cypress trees laced in magical moss. I ruled every creature that slithered and crawled, and cypress trees bowed in my presence. I was queen of the bayou. It was this imagination and this passion for literature that I had as a child that led me to a degree in elementary education from the University of Southwestern Louisiana. Years later, I graduated from Hollins University with an MFA in children's literature after completing my thesis, The Cajun I Am. I have 25 years experience in the field of elementary education. I presently teach 3rd grade in Middletown, Maryland. While I no longer live in South Louisiana, my French heritage remains my constant companion.
Why did you want to write your books?
I went back to graduate school when I was in my early 50s to secure professional development credits as a teacher in the Maryland public school system. While I was at Hollins, in order to complete the MFA program, you had to write a thesis. My thesis contained 6 children's stories. You also had to develop those stories around a theme. So since I was from South Louisiana and my mother was Cajun, I decided to write my thesis and entitle it The Cajun I Am. All 6 of my children's stories are about the South Louisiana French culture. I ended up dedicating the thesis to my grandmother, who is Cajun and lived to be 103 years old. And I also dedicated the thesis to my mother, who is presently 93 years old and still embodies the essence of joie de vivre, which means the joy of life.
What is your writing process like?
Writing each book for me was a unique experience. My books are like my 4 children. Each one is special. For me, in writing, I concentrate on authenticity. For example, when I write, I literally become the characters in my book. One day my husband came into my sunroom while I was revising Hercules on the Bayou, and he stood at the door as he listened to me say, "Take that and that with your blood-sucking pea-brain." My husband stood at the door laughing, and as he left the room, he said, "Hey Claude, if you need any help, just let me know."
What is the best way for an author to start a book or find the right theme?
There's really no one given way to best write a story. Authors approach the writing process from a multitude of ways. For me personally, I first come up with ideas that I think will be appealing to children. And then I map out a basic storyline, which oftentimes will change many times during the writing process. And then I zero in on the hook of the story. The hook of the story oftentimes takes a lot of time for me because that's the first encounter that the reader gets with your story.
What is the hardest part of the entire writing process for you?
The hardest part of the writing process is revision. Writing is a process, and I'm not sure that many authors ever feel that when they write, their story is perfected. At least I don't. It took me about a year to write The Runaway Beignet, and it took me almost another year to revise the story. And one day, and this was a year after the story was published, I was sitting in my sunroom reading a section of The Runaway Beignet. And I remembered putting the book down, and I thought to myself, what in the world was I thinking when I wrote that?
How did you get your books published?
I sent out about 15 different query letters to different publishing houses across the country and just kept my fingers crossed. And then one day I got a letter from Pelican Publishing, and they said they wanted to publish The Runaway Beignet. Pelican Publishing Company also published Hercules on the Bayou and The Cajun Fisherman and His Wife.
When making a book, did you ever have to write the whole book over again to get it published?
I've never had to rewrite a whole story. My publishing house has never asked me to do that. My editor has given the story back to me and has asked me to make some minor changes. But that's why the writer has to be mindful of producing quality work. And that's why the writing process is so important. If a publishing house has to ask you to rewrite a whole story, you're probably not going to get the story published. So you should take every part of the writing process, from the drafting, brainstorming, revising, and editing, and make sure that story is perfect before you send it off.
Please describe how you and the illustrator collaborate.
The illustrator and I never collaborated on the stories that I have written. In most publishing houses today, the writer and the illustrator don't collaborate on the story and the illustrations. I know this may seem strange, but that's the way that it is done. Once the publishing house hires the writer, then they find an illustrator that they think will support that style of writing, and the two don't ever collaborate. I have never met her, and I am connected with him only through Facebook. I love and feel fortunate to have him as my illustrator. I'll never forget when I saw the illustrations for the first time. I felt that the Runaway Beignet literally looked like he had a personality, and that is Herb's creation. The illustrations in the book, when I saw them, literally took my breath away.
What is a challenge or hardship that you faced in your work, and how have you overcome that?
I think one of the challenges that writers need to consider in the publishing industry is rejection. When I set out to try to get The Runaway Beignet published, as I said before, I sent out 15 query letters. I received several rejections. At that point, a writer has to decide, are you going to become thick-skinned and persevere, or are you going to get your feelings hurt and give up? In my situation, I chose to persevere and to just keep trying because I believed in my writing. And in the summer of 2017, The Runaway Beignet became the top-selling children's book in New Orleans, Louisiana. If I had let rejection stop me from persevering, that would have never happened.
What is one thing that you think aspiring authors need to know?
I think the most important thing that aspiring authors need to know is that being an author is not about fame. It's not about wealth. It's about producing quality writing.